His smirk never left his face. His lawyer sat beside him, sweating bullets. The questioning began. The prosecution's attorney rose first, launching into a sharp line of questioning about Project Halo, the stolen data, and the whistleblower files. Maddox responded with smirks, eye rolls, and clever deflections. "I don't recall that. My team handled those details. Is this really the best use of federal time?" Every answer dripped with sarcasm. At one point, he even turned to the audience and whispered loudly enough for the gallery to hear. "Next, they'll ask me if I hacked their microwaves." The gallery murmured in disbelief. Reporters furiously scribbled. His lawyer leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear. Maddox waved him off like an annoying fly. And through it all, Judge Cole said nothing. She watched. She listened. She wrote. She didn't interrupt. She didn't object. She let him put on the show he was so desperate to perform. Because what Maddox didn't realize was this. He was writing his own downfall in real time. After nearly an hour of testimony, dodging and disrespect, the courtroom felt electric, tense, on edge. Then, finally, Judge Cole spoke. She set her pen down slowly, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, but every word sliced through the room like glass. "Mr. Maddox," she began, her tone level and firm, "would you like to try that again?" The room froze. "Under oath," she added, truthfully this time. Maddox's smirk faltered. He tried to laugh it off, but the courtroom wasn't laughing. He looked around and saw not admiration, not amusement, but eyes watching, waiting, judging. Judge Cole's expression didn't change. She stared at him, not with anger, not with hate, but with clarity. A silence hung in the air. Maddox opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Can you repeat the question?" Judge Cole nodded, still cool and composed. "Of course. Let me simplify it for you." She read the question again, this time slower, crisper. "Did you or did you not personally authorize the use of illegally obtained user data in the development of Project Halo?" No deflection. No room to dodge. Maddox glanced at his lawyer, who was now visibly pale. The gallery leaned forward, breaths held. Then, for the first time, Maddox looked unsure. Judge Cole didn't press him. She didn't threaten him. She simply waited. Because power doesn't shout. It listens. And in that moment, the balance shifted. The billionaire who refused to stand for her now sat humbled by the weight of her silence. By day 3, the atmosphere in the courtroom was unlike anything seen before. Reporters lined the back wall. Cameras were aimed and ready. Hashtags with Maddox's name were trending worldwide. Crowds gathered outside, chanting for justice, holding signs that read, "We are not your data, and power must be accountable." Inside, Judge Vanessa Cole sat poised at her bench, dressed in her signature black robe, her expression unreadable. But something was different today. Something the public didn't know yet. Behind the scenes, federal investigators had delivered a bombshell the night before. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't a leak. It was hard, irrefutable evidence. Internal emails, private Slack messages, voice recordings. Documents that showed Maddox was not just vaguely aware of Project Halo. He had personally approved it. In one email, his digital signature appeared next to a line that read, "Push forward. Data equals power. Ignore legal. Just encrypt access." There was no spinning this, no denying, no dodging. The truth had arrived, and it came with timestamps. Court reconvened at 9 a.m. sharp. Maddox walked in differently now, slower, less smug, still dressed like royalty, but with tension in every step. His lawyers looked exhausted. The gallery was electric with anticipation. Judge Cole wasted no time. She picked up a small folder and said in a voice that rang with authority, "This court has received new evidence indicating direct knowledge and approval of privacy violations by the defendant." Gasps erupted across the room. Maddox's head snapped toward her like a whip. He stood, this time not out of arrogance, but panic. "Your Honor, he stammered. This is clearly out of context." He began raising his voice, arms flailing slightly, trying to interrupt the moment, to regain control like he always had in business meetings and boardrooms. But Judge Cole didn't flinch. She lifted one hand, calmly but firmly, and said 2 words, "Sit down." The room fell silent. It was like someone had cut the audio. No movement, no sound. Maddox froze. For a second it looked like he might argue again, but something in her tone, the finality of it, made him slowly lower himself back into his chair. Judge Cole looked at him, no longer simply a judge doing her job, but a symbol of something far bigger. Justice, standing tall against unchecked power. Her voice dropped to a steady, chilling calm.
Judge Vanessa Cole had heard whispers about Grant Maddox long before he ever walked into her courtroom. Whispers of boardroom takeovers, silenced critics, and backroom deals that bent rules until they snapped. Whispers of a man who believed money wasn't just power, it was immunity. Her clerk had even brought her a printed article the morning of the hearing. He told a reporter last week, and I quote, "I don't answer to anyone wearing a robe." Judge Cole read the line, paused, and folded the paper. She didn't respond with anger, nor did she crack a smile. She simply said, "Well, let's see if he answers to the truth." Vanessa Cole had been tested before. In her decade on the bench, she'd stared down violent gang leaders, exposed bribery rings in politics, and sentenced men who threatened her family. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her calm was her power. And Grant Maddox? He was just another ego in a long line of them. So, as the trial began, and the courtroom buzzed with media attention, she sat tall and poised, her eyes steady. Her presence alone seemed to command silence. Maddox, on the other hand, looked like he had walked into a cocktail party. He lounged in his chair like it was made for him. Judge Vanessa Cole had heard whispers about Grant Maddox long before he ever walked into her courtroom. Whispers of boardroom takeovers, silenced critics, and backroom deals that bent rules until they snapped. Whispers of a man who believed money wasn't just power, it was immunity. Her clerk had even brought her a printed article the morning of the hearing. He told a reporter last week, and I quote, "I don't answer to anyone wearing a robe." Judge Cole read the line, paused, and folded the paper. She didn't respond with anger, nor did she crack a smile. She simply said, "Well, let's see if he answers to the truth." Vanessa Cole had been tested before. In her decade on the bench, she'd stared down violent gang leaders, exposed bribery rings in politics, and sentenced men who threatened her family. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her calm was her power. And Grant Maddox? He was just another ego in a long line of them. So, as the trial began, and the courtroom buzzed with media attention, she sat tall and poised, her eyes steady. Her presence alone seemed to command silence. Maddox, on the other hand, looked like he had walked into a cocktail party. He lounged in his chair like it was made for him. Grant Maddox wasn't just rich. He was power incarnate. The kind of power that could make governments nervous and tech giants sweat. He wasn't just a name on a company letterhead. He was the face of the digital age. Founder and CEO of Maddox Dynamics, a trillion-dollar tech empire that built everything from artificial intelligence to surveillance software, his influence reached into smartphones, satellites, and even government systems. The company's logo, a sleek black M shaped like a hawk's wings, was stamped across skyscrapers, data centers, and international conferences. Maddox was often referred to as the King of Code by tech magazines and Silicon Valley's most dangerous mind by critics. But no matter the title, one thing was always clear. He played by his own rules. He was a genius, no doubt about it. He'd dropped out of MIT at 20, launched his first startup from a garage, and became a billionaire before 30. His innovation changed industries. His ambition rewrote them. But with that brilliance came something darker, an ego bigger than the empire he'd built. Grant Maddox believed rules were for other people. He once laughed during a shareholder meeting when someone asked about ethical concerns. "Ethics don't build empires," he'd said. "Decisions do." That quote had gone viral. Investors cheered. But behind the scenes, people in his company whispered about the toxic culture. Executives came and went. Employees burned out and stayed silent until they didn't. Then the whistleblowers came. 3 former employees, senior-level engineers, leaked internal documents, emails, and encrypted messages that told a horrifying story. Maddox Dynamics had been secretly collecting data from millions of users without their consent. Not just browsing history or basic app info. We're talking private messages, location data, conversations recorded through devices, even facial recognition tags. All stored. All used to build what insiders called Project Halo, a predictive behavior system sold to advertisers and, allegedly, government agencies. Once the leaks hit the media, it was chaos. Senators demanded answers. Protesters gathered outside his headquarters, and one by one, lawsuits flooded in from every corner of the country. Maddox, of course, denied everything. On camera, he called it a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Off camera, he was furious that anyone dared challenge him. And yet, despite the growing storm, he still believed he was untouchable. He hadn't been criminally charged yet, but in the midst of the civil lawsuits, the federal court issued a subpoena. Grant Maddox was ordered to appear and testify under oath. His legal team urged him to cooperate, to show humility, but Maddox had no interest in playing nice. "I don't answer to paper pushers," he snapped to his PR manager, "and I sure as hell don't answer to some junior judge in a cheap robe." That's when he saw the name, Judge Vanessa Cole. He laughed, literally. A black woman in her 30s, from a modest legal background. He thought it was a joke. "They're really sending me to her," he scoffed. "What is this, a TED Talk on equality?" To Maddox, Judge Cole didn't just represent the court. She represented everything he thought he was above. Authority he didn't respect, power he didn't recognize, and justice he didn't believe applied to him. So he prepared for court not with facts or respect, but with strategy and spectacle. On the day of the hearing, he showed up like it was a red carpet event. Custom-made Italian suit, flashy gold accessories, no briefcase, no notes, just his signature smirk and a belief that this courtroom, this case, this judge, none of it mattered. He didn't practice his testimony. He didn't review documents. Instead, he rehearsed ways to twist the narrative, belittle the process, and come out looking like the victim. To him, the courtroom wasn't a place of accountability. It was just another stage. Another opportunity to show the world that no one could touch Grant Maddox. But what he didn't know, what he didn't even consider, was that Judge Vanessa Cole wasn't there to play his game. She wasn't impressed by billionaires or shaken by egos. She was there for truth. And this time, the truth had more power than any empire. He refused to stand for a judge, and within 72 hours, his billion-dollar empire was in ruins. This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a real story of arrogance, justice, and the quiet power of a woman who wouldn't flinch. What happens when a billionaire thinks he's above the law and meets a judge who proves him dead wrong? "All rise for the Honorable Judge Vanessa Cole." The bailiff's voice boomed through the grand, high-ceilinged courtroom, slicing through the quiet murmur of the crowd like a knife. The audience, a mix of lawyers, reporters, observers, and courtroom staff, stood in unison, chairs sliding back and shoes clicking against the marble floor. It was a moment of respect, routine, and order, except for one man. In the front row, seated confidently at the defendant's table, was Grant Maddox, a man used to commanding boardrooms, not following courtroom rules. Dressed in an immaculate navy blue suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, a gold Rolex glinting under the soft lighting, Maddox didn't move a muscle. Legs crossed, arms resting leisurely, He looked less like a defendant and more like a king observing a chess match. His head tilted slightly as the judge entered, but his body language screamed one thing: defiance. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Cameras hidden in corners clicked quietly, capturing every second. The tension in the air thickened. A few people turned their heads, unsure whether this was a mistake or a statement. It was no mistake. Maddox made sure everyone knew he didn't stand for anyone, especially not someone he considered beneath him. And in his eyes, Judge Vanessa Cole fit that category. She walked in with quiet confidence, her black robe flowing as she made her way to the bench. Her steps were calm, deliberate, unshaken. She'd been in this courtroom hundreds of times, but today was different. Her eyes scanned the room as always until they met his. For a split second, everything froze. Maddox held her gaze, expecting intimidation, expecting her to falter, but Judge Cole didn't flinch. No raised brow, no anger, no emotion. She simply acknowledged the disrespect and moved on. With a soft nod, she took her seat at the bench. The gavel tapped lightly. Order resumed. But the silence that followed wasn't normal. Even as the attorneys started shuffling papers and court proceedings began, the unspoken tension sat heavy in the room. No one had ever refused to stand for a judge like that before, not in this courtroom, not openly, not with so many people watching. Who was this man who dared to break protocol in front of a federal judge? Grant Maddox wasn't your average billionaire. The founder of Omnitech Systems, one of the largest tech companies in the world, Maddox had built an empire out of ambition and ego. He was known for his genius-level IQ, ruthless business tactics, and a complete disregard for rules that didn't benefit him. To the world, he was either a tech god or a corporate tyrant, depending on who you asked. He'd bought luxury islands, funded politicians, and once famously said in an interview, "I don't answer to anybody, not shareholders, not journalists, not governments." So when he was summoned to court to testify in a data privacy lawsuit, one that alleged his company had knowingly harvested millions of users' personal data, he didn't walk in like a man in trouble. He walked in like a man still on top. But Judge Vanessa Cole, she was no stranger to power games. The first black woman appointed to the federal bench in her district, she had spent her career breaking barriers and silencing doubters. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, she fought tooth and nail to rise through the ranks, from public defender to prosecutor to one of the most respected judges in the state. People called her the calm storm. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't slam her gavel, she didn't need to. Because once she started speaking, you listened. And on that morning, in that silent courtroom, everyone could feel it. Maddox might have walked in thinking he owned the room, but he had just stepped into a court where power was measured in justice, not money. As the trial opened and introductions were made, Judge Cole didn't mention the disrespect. She didn't comment on his defiance. She didn't need to, because every person in that room knew this story was just beginning, and the man who refused to rise, he was about to fall, hard,